So, I would like to introduce therefore the first speaker, who is Dr. Marisa Papaluca from the European Medicines Agency, and she will talk about some of the developments in the regulatory field in the European area. Marisa, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And of course, the first big thank you is to Clinam and to the relentless support Clinam gives to all of us in order for making this conference true and real, which is not an obvious thing. It's tremendous work behind the scene, and we appreciate the effort, the content, and also, I would say, the organizational challenges. So thank you very much for giving a space to regulators in a full session, all for us, in the midst of all these scientists who know much more than us everything about nanotechnology and nanomedicines. So we try to be there to contribute, as was suggested in the speech from our chair, and to be not a difficulty for research and for results of the research to reach the patient, but actually being catalysts and facilitators. So I have to make a couple of disclaimers. The first one is that the views expressed in this presentation are the views of myself after 22 years in the agency, and they're not the views agreed with the committees. So it's not official position of the committees. The second disclaimer is that you can use all the data I presented here, provided the source is mentioned, is acknowledged. And the third disclaimer, which is not in writing, but I can make it in a recorded fashion, is that I don't have any conflict of interest with any of the matters which will be discussed today. The only conflict I have is that I'm really on the side of the patients. So anything which is not for them, I may be, I would say, partisan. So the introduction of the chair has given me already a glimpse on what we do as a regulator. But I would like to go more into the details. And before entering into the details, I want to acknowledge the contribution of my colleagues, Peter Rubin, which works in the agency in the centralized procedure for marketing dossier evaluations. Monica Gomar, who is part of the Secretariat for the Orphan Medicinal Product. She provided me some useful information. Zara Nahizi, who is the first frontline person in the Priority Medicine Scheme, the so-called PRIME. And Robert Gesner, who made a fantastic work in horizon scanning of nanomedicine, and I used some of his data. So I think even he didn't know, but he helped me a lot in preparing this presentation. So thank you, Robert. So this is in one slide only what we do and what we are. So the agency is the result of a network of 28 member states investing in supporting public health with a specific remit on pharmaceuticals. So we support the research of pharmaceuticals. It's in the big round thing. We evaluate pharmaceuticals for access to market. We monitor pharmaceuticals once they're on the market. And we keep up to date our groups and our experts with the decision-making strategy, which is the substance of regulatory science. Who are our customers? This is on the right side, my right side of the slide, is the citizen of Europe, but not only, because by law, we also work for emerging countries, and we have a specific legislative tool, which is Article 58, and in conjunction with WHO, we try to support also the public health and pharmaceuticals use for those countries which do not have yet mature regulatory framework. So we work on one side in training them into the regulatory science, and on the other side, through the WHO collaboration, try to give opinions, scientific opinion on the suitability of vaccine in particular for the population in third countries. By definition, therefore, we cannot work on isolation, and the international context is pivotal. We have some bilateral agreement, we have multilateral agreement, we have fora in which we work, and these are all summarized. You see all the icons in the slide. Of course, we have well-established ancient bilateral agreements and clusters with the Food and Drug Administration from the United States. We developed a lot of work in nanomedicines also with the Japanese authorities, with the Canadian, with the Swiss. So now really the international collaboration in nanomedicines is very, very strong, and we hope to continue being strong, starting in 2007, and now has reached a certain level of maturity. So, we heard about millions and billions of money spent, taxpayers' money spent to support research, because nanomedicine had the promise. And these were a lot of promises: potential to address unmet medical need and personalized medicine using highly active molecules. Some of the promises actually have been delivered. I would not be so bleak. I say, we don't have a lot of nanomedicines on the market, but the ones we reach the market actually fulfill the promise. Think about MEPACT, used in osteosarcoma. We could not use the active substance without a proper nano-engineered system. Then we have upcoming, and we already approved, products which can increase the payload and even tuning the release of payload into cancer. We have a lot of nanoparticles, not a lot, we have nanoparticles and liposomal formulation which really fulfill this promise. Then we have an enabling use of nanomaterials for supporting the development of combined tissues and engineered tissues in the field of advanced therapies, and also nanocarriers, which seems to be very suitable for some gene therapy and gene editing approaches. So we see the things coming along very slowly, in a very limited number, but we see that the promise can be fulfilled. And this is a reason whereby we need to keep pace with what you do, scientists, to be sure that what comes to our desk is suitable. And of course, I want to mention also the contribution to personalized medicine, in particular in the form of diagnostic, in vitro diagnostic. And we have to mention NanoString, which has been approved by the FDA, which has the ability in a very short turnaround to identify sequences which are already known. It's not a research instrument, it's actually an instrument for looking into what is known could be there. So, and other things which in Europe have been approved, like MagForce, which are nanoparticles which are activated by external sources for the treatment of glioblastoma. And because of the particular situation of the legal framework in Europe, those have been approved as medical devices. And we will come back to the borderline between medical devices and pharmaceuticals to see what are the challenges in this particularly promising field. So the promise of nanomedicine, addressing unmet medical need. This is an extract of what we have seen since 2000, since the legislation on orphans has been hitting our door for implementation. We had 28 applications for designation looking at only liposomal formulation and polymers. What is interesting in this slide is first that there are very few, because 28 in so many years is not a lot. Second, the successful one are all liposomal formulations so far. Third, you see the emergence, the arrival of polymers, which is more recent. And also, what is interesting is that whereas initially everything was cancer, 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 now we see additional fields, even within the orphan designation. So this is encouraging. These are signals that things are moving. And then we have approved nanomedicines as well. We have liposomal, we have nanoparticles, we have polymers. We have few, there's not many, but they are there, have been approved. And also, thanks to the work done by Robert, we know that there is quite a lot in the pipeline. I think it's 101 clinical trials ongoing. And you see there is more on the pipeline than what actually has been approved in the recent years. But then we have also nanomedicine scientific advice. Very difficult to track because sometimes companies coming for scientific advice and academics coming for scientific advice, in the wave of terrifying risks of nanoparticles, they try to avoid the term nano. And they come describing things which then you discover actually are nano. But we have seen lots of liposomal formulations, pegylated, non-pegylated, multi-compartimental. We have seen the follow-on in scientific advice. We have seen nanoparticles, both protein-bound or metallic-based nanoparticles. And we start to see nanofibers. We have starting to see nanofibers as structures for delivery. So what we do have in Europe? In Europe, we have a very strong and productive academic environment. And this is clear from the level of publications and peer-reviewed journals. We have a very good academic environment. And this is very important, also in contrast with what we see in other regions of the world, where most of the research on nanopharmaceuticals, nanomedicines, is done by small and medium enterprises. In Europe, we have more on the academic side. We have quite a number, however, of startups and SMEs. Our SMEs office has done a review, and there's quite a number of companies, small companies, startups, which are, coming to agency to qualify as a small and medium enterprise, because this brings a lot of financial incentive, support for translations, because we work in English for the discussion, but then we produce outcome in 24 languages. Of course, a small company will never be able to do it, so we do it for them, and successfully so. We have a financial incentive, so I invite really academics who are about to create a spin-off to think about consulting our website. Is a free of fees, is just a service which would allow innovators really to get a lot of benefit. But really, we think we put together an effective and supportive regulatory network across the Union, and we spend some more words on that. And most important as well, we have a joint strategy. It's not the agency, the European Medicine Agency as such, but the European Medicine Agency as a component, coordinating component of the EU network. So we have 47 national competent authorities covering animal and human health, working together and coordinated by the agency, both for the centralized procedure, but also we host other coordinating bodies like the Clinical Trials Facilitation Group, like the network of national competent authorities who can discuss issues during the evaluation with nationally driven procedures. So I think we have quite a strong network. And also, we have a very important emphasis in international cooperation. But what I want you to attract your attention is to the areas with the lens in this slide to show how academic is important. Of the 94 approved products in recent years at the agency, more than half were originated in the academic endeavors. And then it's interesting to see the picture how reaching the market and making this available to the patients has different actors. You have more small and medium enterprise or enterprises of average size or big pharma as a sort of leading the availability of the drugs to the patients. So I think academics should leave the old philosophy that academy is pure, has no interest, and therefore is better, and industry is the devil who does all the wrong things. Industry does their own job, but I think they should be exploited also from research in terms of using their abilities in order to, again, reach the patient. So we have hot points in nanomedicines. We discussed this morning the so-called non-biological complex medicines, drugs. We have the so-called nanosimilars, which have a specific feature, and they have quite important aspects which are similar to the one we see for biologicals, like the crucial role of the starting materials and the impact of the manufacturing process into the final characteristics of the product, and the need that most of the times the follow-on of nanomedicine requires additional studies. This is not an invention, it's not a sort of visionary thing. These statements are based on the experience in scientific advice. When follow-on products come along, it's almost impossible to define equivalence only on pharmaceutical studies, comparability of pharmaceutical structure. And most of the time, I should say all the time, additional studies have been recommended to the companies. The second hot boiling point is the so-called next generation nanomedicines. And then there we have a blurring across multiple regulatory frameworks, the so-called borderline products. And you have to be informed that in the network, we took this as the first priority for the innovation network to discuss with the medical devices experts, with the regulatory people in the pharmaceutical endeavor, to see how we can come to an integrated evaluation where the best expertise sits on one side or the other of the pond. in terms of framework, because we see more and more control units, additional devices, and then molecules which behave in the body as pharmaceuticals. Are they pharmaceuticals or not? This is quite a complex regulatory and legal issue, because in Europe we do have sovereignty of member states in defining to which regulatory framework the products belong. So we are trying to harmonize this to get to common and consensual approach to these borderline products. And then we have nanomedicine, which are integrated with other technologies, i.e. nanomedicines, which are medicine in all respects, but they will not deliver the effect, the beneficial effect, if it's not jointly used with devices which are not integral part. But how do you evaluate the device separate from the effector, which is the drug, and how you evaluate the drug without thinking about the good functioning and the performance of the device? It's quite it's not an unprecedented thing, because in the radiopharmaceuticals we have this, but certainly is not a trivial discussion here. The chair very kindly already introduced the Innovation Task Force. I presented, and my colleagues Falk Heyman in previous sessions presented the Innovation Task Force. And I alluded to the role of the SME's office in the agency, which is really important for you academics to know about and to peer what is in offer for you there. And I want to concentrate on two elements which were already announced by the chair. One is the Priority Medicine Scheme, and the other one is the EU Innovation Office Network. This is a new guy on the block. Will be officialized, hopefully, over the summer, and will be in full operation in the last part of the year. But we started preparatory work already a few years ago. And last but not least, I will briefly mention the new framework for interaction with academia, which I think is very relevant to this audience. So priority medicine, these are the criteria. It applies only for products under development, and when PRIME can be invoked as a tool for breaking into the regulatory framework successfully. First of all, there should be a proven unmet medical need. It should not be an invented medical need. So there should be some data about the disease. There should be some description of the available tools for treating, diagnosing, or preventing the condition. And there should be sort of a critical discussion on why what is available there does not address a need. Then this could be described in the second part as the predicted effect of your product, and also how your product would fit with the existing treatments. Because every time you innovate, as academics, you always have to think, what will happen to the existing treatment? What will be the impact for the prescriber, for the public health system? And try to get in a dialogue with the people involved in these discussions, because this is very important for the success of your endeavor. When it comes to which data are necessary to be successful in this scheme to get products to the market, different data are required at different stage of development, but even more than that, in Europe, we accept from academic and small companies even very preliminary data, if really there is an opportunity for fulfilling an unmet medical need. So the entry points for any sponsor is at the time of phase 2 trial, let's say. There's already evidence in humans, which is quite convincing, and it could be really an opportunity to move quickly into the subsequent steps of the regulatory trail. But for SMEs and academia, we are less demanding, because we think we have to help small companies and academia to get there, to be able to confirm what they observe in their own initial studies. So as you can see here, the level of data to be provided to enter into the supportive element, into the supportive stream of the regulatory authorities is much, I would say, less burdening. Because we understand that for certain innovative products, if you don't help, they will never come to the second phase. So then what are the consequences of being in the PRIME scheme? I will not discuss here the business case, venture capitalist investment. I would just strictly speak about the regulatory facilitation available. not only you will have repeated scientific advice and repeated support, but when the data starts solidifying in terms of clinical outcomes, you will have your rapporteur, your coordinator, your rapporteur appointed. You will start an ongoing discussion on how to move quickly and on whether your product actually, with the data at hand, really fulfill the promise of priority medicine and could be, in an accelerated review, made available as soon as convincing clinical data are there. So it's not at the end, it's at the beginning. We start with you at the beginning. So I think this is one of the most innovative things we have done in the recent years. The other thing I want to speak with you is about the EU Innovation Network. So we established the Innovation Task Force at the agency in 2001, has been a success story. We have lots of requests for this informal dialogue, without fees, just to get an orientation on what would be the reaction of regulators in vis-a-vis of a real innovative approach. But then this has been sort of disseminated, and the national competent authorities in member states start establishing their own offices, their own innovation offices, specifically to support hospital units, startups, SMEs, and the target products. This is a study which you spend 1 year to come to this core profile. There are differences across the union in different offices, but this is something we all do together and all do at the same time in different parts of Europe. And we offer face-to-face meetings, virtual meetings. We help to prepare for scientific advice. And again, we refer back to the national competent authorities when it's premature for EU level of discussions. So there is a lot which can be gained with the innovation network. So we provide a seamless regulatory support. You see in this scheme the growth of the product. And you see that at the very beginning, the local support is really essential. And the EU Innovation Network comes into play at the very beginning, when you start thinking, oh, maybe I need regulatory support. Maybe I can be considered an orphan. Maybe I can have scientific advice. How do we enter into the stream of regulatory support? And there, really, we have the Innovation Network coming into play. At the agency, we have the Innovation Task Force, where we discuss ATMP classification, certification, all sorts of things. But again, sometimes it's more cost-effective and simpler for sponsor to go back to the national authority, to the innovation office of the national authority. And we established this dialogue with the national authorities where you can be guided about GMP requirements, GLP requirements, lots of things which are not centrally coordinated, but coordinated in the periphery. So it's very important. But what the system also provides for is cooperation with the DG Sante, DG RTD, DG Research, GRC, the UNCLs. We try as regulators really to learn from this network and raise the profile of issues which require a response. And we involve all parties which could be useful for that purpose, internally in Europe and internationally. And so this is, I think, something you need to know. There are overlapping areas where the role of the European agency committees is more prominent. For example, designation of prime has been agreed, is done by the committee in London. And, but the criteria are the ones you have seen. Those criteria you can discuss with your local authority and then come to us. The application should be done to the agency, but the preparatory work, we really hope that you approach your national authority. Also because with the new approaches in adaptive licensing, in sort of stepwise approval of medicines for human use, the regulatory authorities at national level will be your driving force for real-world data generation, follow-up of the initial approvals. And then the international cooperation. I will spend only a few minutes about the International Pharmaceutical Regulatory Forum, which has been establishing a nanomedicine group last year, which has an impressive participation, is really a global endeavor, including not only the traditional ICH International Conference of Harmonization countries like Europe, United States, Canada, Switzerland, but we expanded to Japan, sorry, not to Japan, Japan is already in, to China and India and other major players. And the beauty of this group is that everything which is done and which is a sort of making state-of-the-art public disclosure of where we are with nanomedicines is all available on the website. Anything we do is made publicly available, so you know where we stand. Conclusions. So for current nanomedicines, we think we have a good model to follow. But for cutting-edge emerging nano products, particularly, and I say particularly the borderline, we need to have an early dialogue, very early. At the ITF in London or in the EU Innovation Network, you choose. Anyway, we will be aware, and we will try to make everyone aware of something which is really important and emerging. We also are now engaging more with academia. We are launching a new framework for academia interaction, and this is announced. It's already available on the website, a number of elements there, the pillars of this initiative. This is not yet official. This needs to go through the management of the agency, which, as you know, is governed by the member states. So we have to get the sort of an agreement on the details on how this new framework will be operating. But we do hope to offer a service to academy, establishing an academy office. Will not be called academy office, but will be something which will facilitate the approach to the regulatory environment from the academic groups. For the novel ones, for the novel systems which are currently in R&D, I think we have to boost translatability. This is really essential. We see too little coming across. We have to expand maybe the pre-competitive space quite a lot, as we have done for other pharmaceuticals through the IMI, for example, and also through Horizon 2020, so expanded the pre-competitive space, so all the work which is done by the academics can be really brought to the fruition, but also whenever there is an opportunity, really designate as prime, give repeated scientific advice, take by hands the innovators up to success. Of course, we will adapt guidelines, and we will build international convergence, if not harmonization. We have various instruments for that. I mentioned the International Pharmaceutical Regulatory Forum. We have the ICH, you know very well, but also we can establish new clusters. We already sort of piloted a new cluster, for example, with Japan on block polymer micelles to come with something we could agree, and to which the other actually authorities in the group contributed. But this was an example. For the future, we see that there will be a need of really a converging oversight, integrating evaluation of medicines and devices. Even the frameworks for legal responsibility and approval may be different. We still need to have all the necessary expertise together. We have to tailor the requirements. As I mentioned at the very beginning, how do you tailor requirements for CE marking of a control unit without knowing as the ultimate medicine works with the control unit? So really we need to tailor requirement together. And again, we have to ensure not only international convergence, we are already working on this, but also the EU global competitiveness, because we have such a fantastic life science sector. We want this to be successful. And thank you for your attention.